Today I want to talk about a core concept of investing that can help all of us. And essentially it's that oftentimes, many times, simple is better than quote unquote sophisticated when it comes to investing. Simple doesn't mean easy, and simple can be incredibly powerful. So take a walk with me and we'll talk about this. But before we get going, I just want to point out, look behind me, look how much snow this town has gotten. It's just incredible. It's been a huge snow year here in the western United States. So take a walk with me and let's talk about simple doesn't mean easy, and simple very often is much more powerful than complex. So, you know, what I mean by simple is just the basics of investing, right? For most of us, you know, a portfolio of stocks, bonds, and low-cost exchange-traded funds are the only tools that we need. You know, some people talk about doing options trading. You know, options tend to be expensive. Options are when you're basically making a bet that a stock's going to go up or down, and you actually don't own the physical holding. If you want me to do a video and do a deep dive on options, let me know in the comments. But today's video is not on that. But there's tools like options. There's tools like structured products, which is a contract with a counterparty, often like a major financial organization, because people think that these financial organizations have really strong credibility, and they have the dry powder in order to pay back the other side of the contract if your bet is right. So a structured product might say, you know, you're going to get so much of the upside of the S&P 500, but they're going to protect you on the downside of the S&P 500, and that sounds great, right? You know, you get 80% of the upside, but you know, only 20% of the downside. I'm making up things here, and they're really designed to have a wow factor. But you know, if you read the fine print, there's no free lunch, right? They're making the company that's issuing this contract, that's developing the structured product, the commissions on that are huge. The company that's issuing it is planning on making good money on it. And the only way they can do that if there's an offset. So oftentimes there's a cap on how much of the market return, often they're done like on the S&P 500, how much of the market return you can get on the upside. There might be a cap of like 5%, which means if the market's up 12% in 1 month, you're only going to get 5% of that. Oftentimes you don't get dividends. So, you know, this is all in the fine print. But again, I use this just as an example of a quote unquote sophisticated investment. And that's how it's often going to be pitched to you as, you know, oh, you're an intelligent person. You know, I don't offer this to many people, but, you know, because you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you've done this other investment, you know, you have access to this tool that few people have. It seems kind of a elite, exclusive, and only for super intelligent people. And I just caution you on that, because basically they're built off of the same building blocks as the other investment tools. So which are stocks and bonds essentially. So you hear Elon Musk talk about going back to base principles, right? He looks at electric cars and say, how inexpensive can we make how inexpensively can we make electric cars? And he looks at the battery costs and looks at the raw materials and say, you know, this is the lower bound on what we can do. It's the same thing with investing. You know, these quote unquote sophisticated tools are created from the building blocks of stocks and bonds. And so again, if that's what the underlying is, then that's what the returns are going to be based off of. And all of these fees and commissions, that's basically, you know, taken out of the pool of money that's available for investors to earn. So getting back to simple is powerful, and it doesn't mean it's easy. You know, this portfolio of stocks and bonds and low-cost exchange-traded funds can be really powerful for you. And let me talk to you about how. You know, it's not as sexy. It's not going to sound as fun when you talk to your friends about your portfolio. It's like, oh, that's old style. That's how people did it 50 years ago. Well, all the new style stuff is based off of that as well. And there is an exception to this. If you look at some of the cyber currencies, the Bitcoins, the Ethereum, stuff like that, those are new tools, and nobody knows how to price those, right? I mean, it's basically whatever the next person is willing to pay, and you can make that argument for stocks and bonds too, right? So what's the value of your investment? I'm just going to make up an example. Google. Well, it's whatever the market's willing to pay you at the time. But with cryptocurrencies, it's not an income generating tool like a stock in an operating company would be. So you can look at Google and say, well, what are the profits? What are the cash flows coming off of this operating company? And it can get super cheap. The market can be irrational longer than many people can stick with it. But at some point, the underlying cash flows are going to support the price of the stock. So that's why stocks and bonds, you can actually do a calculation where with again people saying, that's how they did investing 50 years ago. You got to stay with the times. Well, tools like cyber currencies, how do you value that? Right, and there are people that have some thoughts on it. How many miners does the network have, stuff like that. But I like to go back to the cash flows and say, what kind of multiple of cash flows am I paying? So, okay, getting back to simple can be powerful. So you look at this portfolio of stocks and bonds, low-cost exchange-traded funds. That can be the building block of anybody's portfolio, and can really, over time, if you let the stock market do what it does over time, which is as long as companies continue to do things better, faster, cheaper, over time, I think they're going to generate greater earnings, and over time, that's going to be recognized and reflected in the stock price. Now, this is not financial advice. I do encourage you to work with if you're interested in working with an outside advisor, to Google a fee-only financial advisor that knows your situation. But just getting back to the basics here, with that building blocks of those pieces, you can design a portfolio really for anybody's situation, particularly if you add into that dividend-paying stocks that are going to be paying a cash flow out to investors. And oftentimes this can be a really nice match for somebody in retirement. And the nice thing is you can keep your fees very, very low. When I started in the industry over 20 years ago, trading commissions at like Schwab and Fidelity were like $30, and they had come down from like $60 a trade. And then they went down to $10, and then they went down to $5. And now technically, you don't pay any commissions at all at many of these wirehouses, these custodians like Schwab and Fidelity. So how do they make their money? That's a topic for another video, but I can tell you, a lot of us keep some cash in our custodian accounts, and that can be very profitable for Schwab and Fidelity. But don't feel too sorry for them with commissions going down, because they're very profitable businesses. Obviously, they're in the news now with just recently there's been some challenges with some banks here in the U.S., so they're in the news for that. But how do you determine what the right mix of stocks and bonds are for you and your family? That's where having some professional advice can really be helpful. The problem with rules of thumb, you can look online and say, okay, this is my age, and this is how much income I need, and there's some tools that'll help you think through what your asset allocation should be, right? How much should be in stocks, how much should be in bonds, things like that. But when it comes to your retirement, I think you want to be really careful with using these rules of thumb, because this is what you've spent your entire life building up. And I'd really encourage you to at least get a second opinion and have a fee-only financial advisor look at what you're planning on doing, and just making sure that it makes sense for your situation. And that doesn't have to be crazy expensive. Now, I think there's a lot of value in having an ongoing relationship with an advisor, but obviously I'm biased. So again, just keeping things simple. The other thing would be, as few accounts as you can have. You cannot commingle IRAs. So if you and your spouse both have IRAs, you can't commingle those two. You do need at least two, but you don't need 10 IRA accounts, right? Same thing with Roth. You cannot commingle those. So I'd look at it and what's the fewest number of accounts that you can have? You can't mix a Roth IRA with a non-Roth IRA, but what's the fewest number that you can have? Because when you have a dozen different accounts, it's really easy to not have a feel for where you are and whether you're going to meet your goals and how it's invested. And you have 50,000 here and 10,000 there. It's really easy to neglect your account when it's in that situation. So anyways, I'll close by saying I'm a big fan of simple. I do not think simple is easy. In fact, I think, as Steve Jobs would say, simple is harder. But if you can focus on the important things, that allows you to really understand what you need to be worried about, what you need to watch. So simple is not easy, but simple is powerful. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did find the video helpful, do me a favor, hit the like button. It really does help the YouTube algorithm find other viewers that videos like this can be helpful for. And leave me a comment. I love reading the comments. We're building a great community here, so thank you to all of you that are leaving comments. And until next time, I'm Azul, encouraging you to take full advantage of the youth of your senior years. Remember, you're only young once. Use this time wisely.